And all these questions you're bringing up, Michael, what I think you're getting at here is that we're going to get a point where if we can drop the ring into the fire and eradicate, Sauron or whatever you want, just as a metaphor, okay, then what's the world going to look like? We're going to have to rethink everything. But what you've been saying for so long is that we don't actually have to rethink it, because the great geniuses that you've been rolling out endlessly on Unslaved and all your work have already nailed the way you actually put the blueprint out of how we got to Western civilization, that it became the envy of the world, the principles, the philosophies, the ideals, going all the way back in ancient history. And so, we don't have to rebuild the wheel again, do we? Even if everything collapses and there's a big war or a big thing, or
it'll be a joy.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be a joy. It will be the thing that everyone in their secret heart wants to do, because there has been decay. And those decays happen through internal enemies, which is right there in the, in the Oath of Allegiance, and also from external enemies.
Right.
These are very simple, and there's no end of enemies. I mean, this should be axiomatic. We've had them in the schools. Mm-hmm. They're teaching our kids for the last 50 years with this John Dewey socialistic stuff. People who warned were shot down and weren't listened. Neil Postman, Alan Bloom, many others I could mention. John Stormer, right? So I believe this is the delight. You see, one of the biggest constellational shift right now suggests of exactly what we're talking about. That truth is going to come out. That a lie cannot live forever. It cannot skulk in the darkness anymore. The light is changed. And Absolutely. These lies, right, and these programmings, let's say, which is what it is, because it's been, a long march through the institutions, that's going to break down. And so I looked at that to say, I'm very, very familiar, with catharses, that it leads to a greater thing. And what I want our audience to do is to have that in their toolkit, so they're not, beaten from pillar to post with the changes of the magnitude that might be coming. Because either there's going to be a soft attack on China, and give them a bloody nose, and that'll take down communism. The soft one being that the Chinese help in the process, and I'm very much open to that. They owe us a favor. Or it'll be the hard version in which we go and do the business, right? And I'm behind that. So the thing is that what that will mean, though, is that people in the conspiracy movement have to adjust their view, like you hinted, on the status quo of the government, and who's really running it inside. But really, if you, instead of screaming at, the camera right now, screaming at the screen when I say things like that, it's no more different than two groups who have always been fighting each other, who, when a third or fourth group, come in to mess with you, the two so-called enemies suddenly get together real quick. It's sort of along those lines. And it is something that is indeed, plausible and probable.
It's so well. And just for those of you out there who maybe don't quite understand what Michael was getting at there, I'm sure many of you have watched the Game of Thrones series. I know it's very popular. People message me about it all the time. I've seen it. There's an interesting storyline in this series where the whole thing starts out with this common threat of these White Walker beings that were basically going to storm this massive wall that was always put up to protect this kingdom, right? And it kind of shows in the beginning of the season that, this is the big threat that's going to be coming throughout the entire show. And then the rest of the series of these shows are all about the internal battles between different families, all fighting for power of the throne of that place that was being attacked by this common enemy. And the whole thing builds up to the fact that people that were killing each other and killing it was like mafias, all slaughtering each other in the streets and, doing the most horrible things to each other, in order to survive, had to come together, bury the hatchet, and fight the common enemy, or otherwise they would all be equally wiped out. So just to give you some fiction that's been sort of modern for people to understand what Michael was saying there, we may very well be seeing that. So we have to be careful about being attached to information that we read 17 years ago and thinking that that's just always the same.
Even if it's
Things
true.
change. Yeah, even if it's true.
Even if it's true. Because I'm one of them, right? I'm not telling people to do anything I wouldn't do myself. But there are external threats. And a sane person knows how to, weigh it all up. Because that's what I see, is that there could be two phases. It's going to be within a few hours. It's going to be within a few days that we'll know what's going to happen. When a top leader, the leader of the state, the leader of the country says, we've just been biologically attacked, he's not going to climb down the next day and go, I didn't mean it. Come on, guys. Exactly. That's tantamount, or I wasn't thinking, it's tantamount to a declaration of war. And that's why we called you and we had to get this done, to again contextualize. So when I spoke of, the normal Illuminati plan is always gradual, work in the night when people are asleep, but there are exceptions, and this is the exception, right? So it's not that I'm backpedaling, because I totally believe in what I just said before. But the thing is, this had to be added as a footnote, that in a situation where we are openly attacked by psychotic people, well, they're not just your Illuminati who are normally in the West. Do you think I don't know there's an enemy here who's been doing exactly what I've said they've been doing, gradually, right? It's called the totalitarian tiptoe, or whatever you want to call it, right? Of course, they are still there. But that group's tactics have also to change when more psychotic people, who are almost at the end of their physical lives and certainly at the end of their political careers, and every machination they've had has not really worked to the degree that it should show up on their charts, meaning it's a failure. There's been many, many instances in which people like that go rogue. And then they unleash, a coup de grace situation like this, but it also can backfire. That's what I think. I don't think it was, I'm sure they were experimenting with drugs. The proximity of Wuhan to those institutions is just no coincidence. They probably did experiment to a degree on their own people. But remember, if they were to spread a virus, don't you think that those elites would already be immune to the very virus they're about to spread? And that would have to be over maybe a period of 10 years that they've immunized themselves. And so one way or another, this is an attack on the West. Whether it was an attack to completely create genocide, and we'd be lying all around, every one of us would be lying around dying, or it's more this botched job that they've done, an inept version, it wouldn't really matter. In both scenarios, it is an attack. It is a declaration of war on their side, and then, right, there has to be a counter, declaration on our side. And therefore, the shifting of the future and the destiny of the West is obviously not gradual, right? So my words previous could have put people to sleep a little bit, and that's why I wanted to make sure, that it's all laid out very, very clearly. Because if this type of declaration is made, and let's just get into that now, get your comments. In the domino effect, if China is taken down successfully, don't you see that North Korea, right? Don't you see that other enclaves of this kind of communism? Don't you see that the Islamic version of it, right, it has to completely fold up, because they'd be destroyed. Once the West is actually mobilized against a definitive target, that is communism finished throughout the world. And that alone, you see, is very promising and hopeful. And it's also, we're past time, actually. We're past time that this should, have more people should be educated on this. And the leftists had to work out that every time they open their mouths about anything, even on a state level, let alone a federal level, more people are woken up to their illusion. We've said it so many times before, but George Orwell's quote, which should be promoted to one of the most important quotes ever in the history of the world, was the quote in which he said, "The left are the worst advertisement for themselves." You see that every time they open their mouths. So in one way, a lot of people are aware of what's going on, right? And then you cannot deny that on the secret government, deep state level, right, this pestilence changes the dynamic, right? It doesn't mean that, they've all become automatically angels overnight, but they have recognized what the real threat is. Oh, and the one thing I forgot to mention, which is probably the most important, if the external enemy is taken down, right, the communist enemy, what does that mean for all those agents working inside America? It means that they are gone. They go up in a puff of smoke. Not one will want to sit at their desk and keep putting out more liberalistic crap. Right? So whether the people in New York or all the leftists in America, they'll not be able to do anything about it. There's not going to be any soft way that you can, ameliorate it, that you can fudge it. It will mean the complete ending of their paradigm. And if anything, the default position for them will be to, people will maintain a sort of a classical liberalism, but it will not be militant. It will not be active. And as I said, over given a period of time after the military rule, right, martial law ceases, and that'll only happen when things get back to some sort of normality. After massive deportations, after the crackdown and the arrest of card-carrying communists or pinkos in the media, this will all mean this, by the way. And it's all good. Let them go to the wall. They've been nibbling at our civilization for decades. They have absorbed and propounded the most preposterous, destructive, evil, ideologies you could imagine. Look at Sweden. Look at that fucking place, right? What a fiasco. How could anybody do that? How could anybody leave themselves open to that? Well, there's going to have to be payback time. And America is no different. But the detergent means that will be the end of what we know as these, as radical socialism. It will have died its death. It will have breathed its last breath. And there's nothing negative about that. And then the reconstruction takes place. And I think that that's the meditation for people. Whether this comes to pass or it doesn't, try to start to envision in your mind what that will mean for you so that you can rekindle it, because it's all there. Our ancestors did it before. You were talking about the past earlier on. You're quite right. This is what I mean in tangible terms, though, not some abstract, so what happened? No, a real formation, like almost going back, and the constellational alignments support this, going back to almost, zero, going back to build again. If a house of cards falls, you have the will and the strength and the fortitude to put it back together again on all fronts, starting with education, starting with economy, and all of the rest of it. So that's the vision that one should have, if they're going to be heroic. The rest is, well, then obviously you crawl away and you shiver to death, and the enemy wins that way. I have no problem with the takedown of communism because I've been studying it all my life. My dad was a top Marxist. His ideology was totally psychotic and, irrational. And all his mates, even though they had the top jobs and smoking expensive cigars and living like luxury in the West, all they could do was spit at it, right? All through the years of my life. And then studying the actual paradigm with the help of great people like Ralph Epperson and others as well, right? And G. Edward Griffin. So I know it through and through. It's something we want rid of in this world. So if you have to pull the scab and you have to, go on certain rations for a while, and you got to stay a little bit on lockdown for a while, don't just come up with bizarre, irrational ideas, which is KGB Central, which is love you to have, which is breaking the morale that you have on the West. That can so easily happen and probably will. Nothing I say is going to change that. But, it's my duty that even if only one person is listening to this, I have to speak. You have to. I can't just say, well, nobody's listening, so I'm not going to speak. Unfortunately, I'm in a position, morally, where that just is not an option. How can you say you're heroic and you love heroic, forefathers, and then not be heroic yourself?
Exactly.
My God, that just can't happen. Yeah. So you step out and you say, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could rebuild America? Look at California. Who the fuck? Do you know who runs that place? Look at Canada. You don't want to change up there? You must be half mad.
We're dying.
Like, we have to have a purging. This country has gone to war for less. This country has fought civil wars for less. This is like worse than getting rid of the British Empire, because actually the parliamentary system locked in after, a few years after the Declaration of Independence. I believe, and others believe also, that had America's War of Independence taken place a little later, we'd have a parliamentary system identical to England. So half the things that people think in America was against King George and all of that, and believe me, there were things to be against, but actually it would have been a lot less of a fiasco, and we'd probably have not a republic, a republic democracy, where we would have almost the identical political system that was in Britain and came to bear in Britain, all right? So we've got much more in common. We've got much more in common than we think. This fight against world communism has to be thought of as absolutely, beyond that. And therefore the sacrifices that may need to be made, I hope that there are no sacrifices. I hope this goes off, and China just capitulates. If there's a declaration of war, they damn well get the message and back right off. But either way, Western forces will have to occupy China for the duration. There's no other way. You couldn't trust anything they say, so it would have to be, we'd have to quarantine their country for goodness knows how long, because they are the enemy and they deserve it. Now, your point, absolutely, that you cannot have Western leaders allowing, right, and these are communists, allowing waves and waves of immigration in to substantiate their communist purpose, and do it around the time when Trump comes up, because his rising is a counteractive to that. You can't have what you're saying is happening in America with the Bill and Melinda Gates foundations and all the other ones. You can't have all of that. And then you can't have this happening. And there's been so many preludes to this, right? As you say, other viruses, other things going on. You just mentioned several. You can't have all of that without an China isn't arranging all of that on its own.
Exactly.
Right? But that is because we have to widen our whole concept of what this communist international is. And you and I have done podcast after podcast with that exact thing in mind, with Kent Clisby, right, and John Sasser, Chuck Sasser, and Chuck Morris, and others as well, hoping that this will come to bear. Trevor Loudon, you wouldn't imagine the effort, putting book lists together, highly selected, all read by myself. There's not a book on there that hasn't been completely read. And there's actually a lot more, you see, that I haven't read, so I don't put them on the list. Everything on that list I've read and know is a masterpiece, so read it. And there's some that are there where, I don't quite believe, I'm not as leftist as those people, or I'm not as politically correct, or I'm not as Christian, let's say, right? There's a couple of books on there that I put by ardent Christians. I don't support that. But the other work that they have there is absolutely, you see, and I've always been like this. I haven't let my bias or prejudice stop me, right? But this is the opposite of the liberal. Everyone by now should know who the fascists really are on all levels. So when we're fighting communism, we're fighting fascism. We fought it before. We fought other forms of socialism before, right? So get ready for the fight. And if there's a fight, I don't want to see no trembling. I don't want to see anything but complete, faith and conviction, because what we're fighting is the deadliest enemy that has been raging since the time of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, right? And the world conflagrations that happened in the 18th century, right? That have led to all of this. And there's even darker forces behind that, which in the domino effect might in fact even be taken out. There's even more elite forces behind, and we might compromise them. There may be a day when we actually really can get to, dealing with them, but you've got to do it in stages. So all of these things that I am seeing, now I hope people can share my perspective. I'm seeing it as the first fraying of the edges of the world disorder, right? Because it is evil. And I've said for years and years and years, the evil has within it the seeds of its own destruction. The more evil you are, the more you wave a flag to nature to say, come and get me. So that's why when I see things like this uproar, I don't see it as something destructive. I see it as something cathartic, right? In which now that tipping of the balance, is going to happen. And of course, to substantiate it, you look at your numerologies, you look at, the symbolism, you look at the zodiac. And as I said, one of the biggest constellational shifts actually shows that the lie is over. The lie is finished. And that there's going to be an act of destruction, very similar to what the tower struck with lightning represents in the tarot. But it is that the false has to tumble, has to fall. And the forces that bring it about create an incendiary kind of luminescence in which you get to see the truth and you sort of wake up from the spell yourselves. And of course, I think, was it you who mentioned that before, or was it Ronnie Landis? Before a detox, right? Before you have complete health, there's this detox moment, isn't there? And you can feel very poisoned and very smothered and all the rest of it. So watch out for that effect. Don't get thrown by it, because again, you don't want, the enemy knows all this. Try to sit through it cathartically and regain your senses. There's a lot of catching up to do. We've offered time after time on Enslaved, the procedure of how you let that be easier for yourself than harder. And it will mean swallowing some bitter pills. But what of it? We're getting rid of we could get rid of, I'm hoping we do get rid of, the worst pestilence. People talking about Luciferians and Satanists. I'll tell you exactly where they live. And the time has come, to rid ourselves of it.
Well, and I mean, you, Michael, have labored also to show that this is an ancient battle. And I'm thinking about this in terms of Lord of the Rings, because I've been going through the films and reading from the books during this past time off, just to gain some insight into what C.S. Lewis was trying to use this metaphor that he told in that story as a way of talking about how evil works and how the dynamics work. And
Tolkien, right?
Tolkien, sorry. Yeah, Tolkien. I've been reading C.S. Lewis too. I got a good quote I'll share in a minute from him. But
he says the same stuff.
The same stuff, right? And it's the idea that this is an age-old battle. And this was something you said, I think, in your first Atlantis presentation. You were like, this is an age-old battle. And it's probably even cosmic. It probably goes even beyond this planet where we live. But here we are, and we have, you went back even to ancient Egypt, and you discussed the idea of ancient cults and the Atonists and the Ominists, and how there was an overtaking in the historical period in Egypt where the good ideas and concepts that brought liberation, freedom, and prosperity to those people was also overtaken by a different ideology. And then you can follow this battle all the way through history, and you come up to the Jean-Jacques Rousseaus and all of that, and you can show it, but it goes back even further. I even went into an ancient communist cult that existed in the Middle Age period, where they attempted to overthrow even the feudalist system, and it was even worse than the feudalist system, for Christ's sake. So go check out that. I think that was in episode 4 of my cult series. But you've been talking about this as an age-old battle, and we're using the terms today, socialist, communist, but these are, like, they were created by the Illuminati and the Jesuits and all that anyways. This is all, so even that's the enemy that we're identifying with those words today. That's the guise that they're wearing. But we know that there's an ideology that is running through behind even that. And as you said, this might be a domino effect. So when we're dealing with any thing with China, or and we're talking about the Chinese government, I actually think a lot of the Chinese people are going to rise up and help with this, based on what I've been hearing. But we've seen that there needs to be an unseating of at least those public centers of power, in the sense of, like, you've got these World Health Organizations and all that kind of stuff. But then beyond them, there's other forces at work as well. So in the end, as you're looking at this cosmically, would you say that, when you were talking back in the day when everybody was thinking the world was going to end in 2012, remember that? And you were always sitting there going, no, a phase is going to end and a new phase is going to begin. And that phase is going to be the age of revealing. I mean, for crying out loud, 2012 up to today, if that wasn't an age of revealing, I don't know what is. I mean, more and more is coming out, and it's getting faster and faster and faster by the day. And so when you come in and you're talking astrology, and people might be like, oh, here we go with the astrology, just hold on a sec, because your predictions were accurate. And here we are living in a time where the lie is starting to come untethered or whatever, untethered. Would you agree that this is age old, and at the same time we are indeed living in a grander cycle where this has to happen? And in order for that to happen, you got to pull some teeth, and you got to be uncomfortable, and there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable periods before we get to a point where we can rebuild.
Yeah, it'll be our countries against them. We'll mobilize against them. And at the very most, all it will happen is martial law. And that's not a bad thing. That just means that everybody will be fed. Everybody will be, there'll be order and stability. Of course, if Google are all arrested, the elite, and the YouTube is elite are arrested because, they're under martial law and they're known to be communist agitators. That doesn't mean that the YouTube and Google won't still be functioning, right? They'll be staffed by people who have the technological expertise. But it's the elites that will be taken down. Same in the press, you see? And all of that. You're quite right. In 2000, on public radio, I think it was, I pulled a card, and it happened to be the tower struck with lightning for the next year, prediction for the next year. Then came 9/11. And so one does put their trust in it, not because we're idiots, but because we've worked with these arts a lot and see that they come true. And not only do they come true, but they help to sharpen your own keys of decipherment. They help you analyze. They help you open up critical ability. So they're good on multiple levels, not just the did it come true stuff. That's what the layman thinks is so important, but there's so many other importances about this, and they help with your intuition and so many other things we could say. To answer your question about higher forces, it's the black nobility, and where it becomes more archonic, and it does, because all satanic forces like the black nobility are religious, right? Right. You're quite right to speak of this, because there is a point that most people do not know, that politics becomes a religion. And when we say that, we're not talking about the Baptist church at the end of the street or the Seventh-day Adventists or whoever it might be, right? Right. We're talking about religion in the capital R way, beyond Judaism, beyond Christianity, any boogaloo, Life of Brian stuff that has come up. One thing I should add also is that any form, it goes on from what you're saying, any kind of attack that's happened through these generations on the West is not only external attack. We have allowed it to happen. So when I'm looking at what the constellations are saying, I'm looking at this sea change that will happen from within, because you don't get rid of the things, just in case people missed it. We are as culpable as the enemy, because we've allowed them to enter into our minds and eat of our table. So the type of dynamics that I'm talking about when I see a change are far more profound than any Alex Jones or anybody else is ever going to speak about. Half the programs you and I have done already are transcending that level. It's not just political stuff. It's a radical remasculinization of the whole of the West. If that has to happen by the death of the old West, what the hell? I'll put the coin in. because I'm my disposition, my temperament's prepared for that. I know a lot of other people aren't. That's why we're talking this way, to fortify people, to get them to understand. The system that you've got under your feet is completely rotten. It's made rotten also by your own attitudes, right? Of which communism and anarchism, leading back into the past, as you're suggesting, the philosophies of psycho like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and anybody like him only got read by and made bestsellers, right? Because of a bunch of lunatics who led to the reign of terror, right? A bunch of younger people, students, and so on. And it's been the same pattern over and over again. As we say, socialism's narrative is very threadbare. If you study it, you'll soon get on top of it, and you'll realize what the hell is going on. Like many in the left have. Do you realize that most of these Dinesh D'Souza, not him specifically, but a great many other, David Horowitz, for instance, Mark Stein, they were all card-carrying liberals before they became who they were? There's that proof. Probably even Tucker Carlson was, for goodness sake. And so on. So there is this defecting that happens and this dissension from within because it is so bankrupt. But getting back to the point, we are complicit in our own dining with the enemy. And that has to stop. That's what immunity really is. When you gain back your sovereignty, you say, I shall not allow the enemy to my table, right, anymore. I did before and I rue the day because it poisoned, us by its very presence. And we're not going to allow that today. And that could be one of the changes. And that is also a sign that I see in the astrology, right? A restoration on the individual level in their concept of sovereignty. It's backed up even by that lesser constellational change of Saturn and Aquarius, by the way. But back to the black nobility. By the time that politics is traced back past Jeffrey Epstein, up, bit higher, and you get up to a certain weird place, between the cloud line, and you're going, don't like the smell of what's up there. Listen, you've already moved from anything to do with politics and political parties, and you're already moving into religion, right? It's priesthood the Illy's time now, mate. And you can just tumble back like Jack and Jill down the hill if you don't know this. And at that point, after you pass through the clouds, it says like the darkness does one good thing for you. It sharpens your eyesight. You have to have a kind of seeing in the dark. Well, once your eyes are acclimatized and you're able to go through into those dark corridors, you start to understand that this religion is Gnostic. All caps. Even the street level Gnosticism, which you find, whatever, whatever. But when you start moving up, you start discovering really what Gnosticism is. And then you go a little bit further, right? And now you start finding about set worship and atomism and comets. And, this thing gets pretty wild. You think down here it's chaotic and wild. Jesus Christ, that's the kindergarten level, right? And when you even go higher than that, there's a very good chance, and I did write about this in my first work, the Atlantis book, that there's something else, right? There's something else even on an archonic level. And the most I've ever explored it is in the Atlantis book, and that was bad enough. I had to put the pen down, so I'm not going to visit this anymore, right? There's something very weird at the very highest levels, right? But coming down a bit, yep, it's the Nazarene sect that was communistic in the beginning, right? The Nazarene sect of Judea, Parthia, right? They're really a female Illuminati, but let's not get into that. This extremely important and powerful group, right? They created what was, they blended with the Nazarene church, which is the Jewish sects. And they were always very liberal in the first place. They were fighting against Rome. From amongst their coterie, guess who our guest is tomorrow? Ralph Ellis, the expert on this. From their coterie, they had a Judas Harlequin character, right? Saul Josephus Flavius, who under many, many guises started to realize that he could make a breakaway sect, a breakaway religion from these Parthian, Judaic, right? Atonist, set, whatever you want to call them. They're really, we just call them the fourth sect, right? So Paul Josephus, under the guise of Saint Paul, laid the foundations for the fifth sect that later, goes off and becomes papal Christianity, which is still in the world today. We're doing real good. It's a lot of progress in the history.
Vatican stuff, right? The Vatican, the Jesuit type guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can go and visit them. You can take a selfie right in front of them, right? Yeah. So we're still in the trap of this dragon. But the liberalistic sect that has opposed them in the dark, that's behind the Jesuits, as you said, they formed the Jesuit order. Jesuit order, can you believe it, are worker ants to the people we're now talking about, just in case people didn't catch it. Your so-called Knights Templars, the highest nobility in the West, worker ants to the group we're talking about. So it takes a lot to be able to see behind that wall, right? And Freemasons and a lot of Sabbateans, right? They're all acolytes of this group. This group don't operate on the level we do. We've talked about it in terms of private and public worship. I'll be asking Ralph about this to extrapolate further, this theory I have, right? But these black nobility have a private form of worship that is undisclosed. And that really answers, your point. Because to get into disclosing it takes us way, way, way. I've written about it on the Female Illuminati website for those who are interested. But the thing is that what has happened is that by and large, a lot of the public forms of worship, religion with the small r, the religion, where you club each other over the head type of religion, that is a smokescreen that has elements of this other private worship scattered in it. Like sun worship, comet worship and all that. It's all there, but it's in an absolute state of, Alice in Wonderland kitchen. It's a total mismatch. And what the hell, they know we're all irrational. We'll bite down on it, and we have. And then the only response to it is some sort of pathetic atheism, another bankrupt paradigm. You see, so look, that's where we are. So we're under attack on multiple levels, right? Meaning, it comes back to the point we're making. Yes, there are bona fide, objective, evil, deeply evil forces out there. But you know something? What I've been saying from day one of my career is those people would just disappear in a puff of smoke if we had 5% immunity, if we knew what evil really was, if we had our act together, right? And we don't. So what I'm seeing in the heavens now, to be, blasé about it, right, is that there is a chance now for a radical revolution on that level. Now, the domino effect will mean it'll be the taking, to everyone in the world, it will look like it's the taking out, they'll be dancing through the streets like they were at the end of Hitler was licked. Okay, we can't stop that. But behind that level, there's something moving seismically deep down, deep plutonically. Pluto, one constellation I forgot to mention, it's one of the bigger ones, is the planet Pluto is moving through the last few degrees of Capricorn. So anyone listening to this who has a modicum of understanding about astrology will go, okay, got it, that's it. Right? But actually it is it, but it's also a larger plutonic force that's happening in a bit of a larger way, like you're talking about. And you know who the first people are who know that these constellational ones are moving? Are the evil ones. They're way ahead of, we'll never find out, right? They already know years before, right? And they're acting in this way that you alluded to in the beginning of your commentary, where there's a fear and there's been a failure. And the Dark Lord's going to fucking eat them alive bit by bit and then use their bones as a toothpick. And they know that because the forces you conjure, if you don't give them and you don't abate them and you don't placate them, guess what? The unholy eye turns on you. Evil implodes. That kind of dynamic is what's happening. So we should be sighing relief. We should be able to let go of baggage. We should be celebrating. We should be saying, when can I dance in their bones? Make sure I'm invited to the party. All right? So this cognitive shift is very, very important. So don't get distracted by unfamiliar astrological jargon, because that ultimately is what it is. What I'm talking about is the psychological underpinnings. When I say Pluto, I mean on the deepest strata of the psyche that can no longer tolerate lies, that can no longer tolerate your own lies against yourself, all the self-deceptiveness of our societies, all the idiotic, parasites, all the pirating, all the extortion, all the confiscation. Don't let the fact that even though our governments are hugely criminal organizations, right, and are a problem, yeah, but we'll deal with them in time. Get with the gig so that the real evil can be taken out, right? And then we'll have the fortitude and the willpower, and nothing will stand against us. We've been so, the Svengali has been working for such a long period of time. Long before communism itself physically manifested in America, which you can give a date, Woodrow Wilson, whatever, right? It's important to when you're studying the history of it, we've done that on programs. We're going to continue doing it. But never forget that none of that evil would ever have worked if there wasn't some loose screw in us from the beginning. We're going to have Kevin McDonald on to dive into that question. There's elements of his work that I find bear upon this. You see, and I want to ask him questions. We want to see what he's got to say about Puritanism, about Christianity, about the Constitution. There was doors left open here, and if we were ever to reconstitute things, we'd have to close those doors. Maybe it's not right for all religions to be allowed a freedom in the country, and on from there we could go. It would just get more and more controversial as if I was to continue talking. And I've learned to keep my mouth shut on certain issues that are in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and that have also been taken as even the doctrines of liberalism. You see, one has to be very cautious. So we won't go there yet. But the thing is that there are paradigm shifting things in the truest sense of the word. And the paradigm shifts always take place when the mainstream paradigm is turning to jello. So materialism is jello, economic theory is jello, education, that's long gone. That isn't even jello, right? And so on. And so yes, not because of our self-deceptiveness, but because of some other action, right? Something far more archetypal. Communism is finding itself ready to go down with the Titanic into the whale shit where it came from and where it belongs. Get behind it, folks. Light a candle on your cupcake, or half of a cupcake as it is now. Fine. Eat the candle. Have a little smile in your heart for what's going to happen. Right? Don't be worried about it. There's something immense on the horizon, and your fear and your panic is only serving the enemy, the beast, because it tunes into that, right? We're talking. That's what we mean about a little bit about Gnostic archonic activity. It will suck your fear. Well, it's not getting any of mine. It's not getting any of mine because that's helped it in the past, right? It's going to see one big fucking finger is what it's going to see, and a big smile. Your days are over. You're busted. And, people are hearing the sound of my voice know this. There's a lot more people than me have been waiting for this in this movement. Followers of G. Edward Griffin and other people who've been waiting for the day, and who've grown up reading the great patriot work. Well, this is it. Get the scales removed from your eyes because, this could be it. And if it happens, don't be trembling. Get out there and join it. Communism is your enemy. China is your enemy, right? Islamo, whatever, is an enemy, right? And it's not only foreign, it's here. Right. So, and if you are able to mobilize against it, then mobilize against it. You have to have that fortitude and masculinity. Don't get feminized. Don't get prevaricating and listening to the script of the enemy, which has survived because of our own inaction for far, far too long.
Yeah, well said. It's like that scene when the king in Lord of the Ring, he's saying, "A day may come when the courage of men might fail, but it is not this day." And you have to take heart those messages of truth. It is not this fucking day, no way. And no matter what's going on, we know something's going on. We're all sitting here in quarantine, biting our nails, trying to figure out what's going on. From day one, I've been trying to advocate in my own psyche, in my family, in my friends, and on my show that, yeah, I'm here speculating on my channel, trying to figure out what's going on, and we're bringing different people on to bring all the theories to the table. And I know it's uncomfortable, and I know you can sit there and accuse me of scaring you even more than the media by doing that. But the fact of the matter is, the danger is real. Whatever danger, we can argue about what the danger is, but the danger is real. Our reaction of fear is the choice we make. And even if you feel fear, there are exercises and there are things you can do to empower yourself to deal with it. Don't repress it. Don't drown it with drugs and alcohol. Don't do, keep everything under check and all of that, moderation and things, but try to come back to that place where you can find courage. And that's why I've been also mixing up a lot of my content with bringing very positive, empowering quotes from some of the greatest martial artists, the greatest thinkers, greatest writers on courage, on tough times. Our forefathers through centuries have gone through far worse than this. Even though this seems to be all coming to a major head and it's a historic moment in time. I mean, just watch that movie 1917 and see what the 16-year-old of those days were doing. All those boys throwing themselves in the ditches and fighting and dying in the millions. And you hear the sounds of we can't even imagine it. And then just take it all the way back. All the what G. Edward Griffin say, all history is palace plots and conspiracy and overturning empires and battles and internal struggles and political chaos and Like human beings, we're forged. All that blood, all those genetics, all that memory, just as much as that ancient trauma you've been talking about, Michael, flows in us. Yeah, but so does the strength. So does the strength. And you got to feel it. And sometimes you need your back up against the wall to really feel alive, to really feel strong. I've been talking about feeling strong, and people are sitting there in their apartments and everything's normal and they can get access to Starbucks anytime they want. They're like, what do I need courage for, Dave? I'm good. I'm satisfied. Well, now all that's gone. So now it's time. Now it's time to connect to your courage. And you are built for this. And you came in this time. I believe it. You came into this time, in this place, in whatever it is, April of 2020, to experience what's happening now and what's about to happen. And it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Regardless of what it is, it's not all bad.
No, half the constitutional alignments I'm looking at are actually surprisingly not bad. They tell you that there's upheaval, but they say that on the basic level is the rekindling of a heroism that has long been missing in the West. Wow. And so all the other narratives, fade into that. They fall back into this. That if you don't have the fortitude, then the maggots will be there. You see, if the meat isn't fresh, you can't stop the parasites from coming. Half the things that we know that we call malignant, right, that we call evils, only got to exist because of fudgy thinking or false starts. We don't need to belabor it. People know what we're talking about. It's like in your own personal life, your tolerance of a vampiristic kind of person. Yeah, they don't go away of their own kind. You've got to tell them, out, we're done with you. Bye-bye. Don't care what you think. We're tired of being sucked off. So it's really as simple as that. But it is it's a little bit off. It's a little bit weird because it's happening deep down, right? The restoration, let's just put it the way, the impulse for the catharsis is quite below the threshold. And that's why you have to use these divination arts like astrology to, feel what's happening so that you get orientated right. Whereas other people, it's just running around like Castro Valva, it's just running about like a gremlin. You don't know, where the center of the earth is. You know what I mean? And yeah, bringing back, see, for every problem that could exist, no matter what it is, the solution lies inside yourself. But we become so flabby that we don't use the critical ability to say, not only do I have a problem with this person or this issue that I'm going through in my life, but we're less and less aware now that we contain the secret of it inside. Remember we were talking about that anecdote about positive thinking as opposed to positive action? That's just one iteration of it. Half the time, if you positively act, right, and just act for the sake of acting, it will transcend any positive thought, which will never get you anywhere. It'll just, be the roller coaster ride round and round again. And one of the shows we were talking about DIY, and we weren't doing it tongue in cheek. Do you know how to carve a throwing star and a target out of hay in the back garden? Get on with it. Throw them stars right at the head. Right? Get out and do something. Forget the positive thinking. Take a piece of metal, carve out a throwing star, and start practicing. What reason? None. Get a bow and arrow, right? Go out, start practicing. Any reason? Nope. Because there's something about the childlike curiosity, right? And definitely, as we more seriously mentioned, the idea of getting back working with tools. Half our flabbiness, half our impotency, especially in the male, is because we're no longer using tools. It's all this on the computer and whatever else. And you're an exception because you're working with tools every day, in the weaponry, right? Jesus, just get a stick, folks, and go out there and play Robin Hood. I don't care what it is. But the thing is, there's all sorts of components to this. Heroism is not really a matter of positive thinking. It's more about positive action. It's grounding yourself, right? It's really doing meditations that ground yourself in the earth. And also meditations that take you back to your childhood, meditations that examine the problem and not make it a problem. Instead of running away from your pain, I saw something on Facebook, in order to escape the pain, go and learn something. I was ready to write underneath it, yeah, from the pain. They're still talking about it. Don't you see? They're still talking about, go learn something. Oh yeah, so I'm still running away from it, you chumps. I will go and do something and learn about my pain. I want it to educate me. I want to know what it is. I don't even know what it is. I just keep feeling this thing, but I have no idea what it is. I go through agony. I go through depression. I've never sat with it. I've never let it teach me. I've never welcomed it. I've never said hi. Never greeted it once in my life, and then they wonder why it doesn't go away. And the older and older I get, the more pessimistic and down and broken I become. Yeah, because you've never turned to this extreme teacher, this master teacher, who holds the key of enlightenment in his hand, and said, "Welcome in. Tell me more." That's not heroic. That's the absolute antithesis of heroism. Look at the teens now. For this, you deny them some microwave grub, and they shoot the parent. Right? You say, you're not going to go out with that guy or girl, not for a year or two, and they're butchering their whole family. Right? What is that all about? Right? Because it's too late to teach it now. Right? There's no manual at that point when the person has been reduced to just desiring and not having any reason to understand, delayed gratification or whatever it might be. And so the great archetypal lessons of life are always being learned at all time. You could have Armageddon. We could be speaking right now in the middle of World War. Do you know something? It has no bearing on the lessons that one has to learn. Right? You're going to learn the fundamental few archetypal things about human existence, right? Existentially. No matter what kind of, circumstances is happening outside. But the true existentialist, and I've been saying it for years, understands that we manufacture, right, social, political problems in order to escape learning anything. And that dynamic has to be explored. And it cannot be explored in an hour. It cannot be explored in one book. It's a lifelong thing to which I have committed. And I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I'm the one who knows the benefit of doing it that way. So do you think that some little powder puff coming up, telling you, you're this and you're that? Yep. Have a nice day. Right? Because I'm extrapolating and exploring why that dynamic exists and trying not to get distracted by all the other voices out there. Because it's fine-tuning to really observe, why do we prefer chains of gold and chains of iron? What is it that we have in our mind that wants to evade selfhood? And then, that takes you into areas that we couldn't possibly explore here. We've been doing that on Enslaved from day one, and I've been doing it for 30 years. Slowly, meticulously discovering what it is about self-deceptiveness that causes, you see, it's like the archetypes that are happening now in the sky are like this. They're touching the wound, right? They're touching the wound, but they're saying, does this wound kill you? And if this wound hasn't killed you, then it's Nietzsche's old story about that which does not kill you makes you stronger. That's where we are right now. We've been deeply wounded, right? Our minds, our psyches, our bodies are deeply wounded. But if the death knell hasn't come, if we haven't died of those wounds, then watch the fuck out, right? It's the man with no name coming back out of the pit. I thought we shot him 50 times. Yes, not. Right? That's the hero. He's maimed. He is wounded. Right? But he reemerges because he's cracked it. He's learned it. Right? And sometimes this happens even on the political or world scale. But if you lose sight of the archetypal posting and the mooring, you're finished. The enemy doesn't even have to take you down. You're already taking yourself down in fear. But if you understand where your boat is moored and you understand, right, these existential issues, it fortifies you. And like you're saying, then substantiate that with other practices, breathing, grounding, right? Working with tools. When I say these things about, making weapons and going, I mean it. I'm not speaking metaphorically, actually. I speak metaphorically so many times and euphemistically that they probably think that I don't mean it. I mean, get a pointed stick and go out there and, stab it into the earth. Go and do some sand raking. Go and look at the trees and that, analyze what they are. It'll help ground because it's of nature. Go out and run around in the rain naked, whatever's your preference, you know what I mean? But do it. Wallow around in the mud. Whatever it's going to take to get you grounded, right? Eat mud. That's a really good one. I think I'll do that myself, right? Eat. I don't care what it is, but this is the time to make sure you're very, very close to the reality, right? Very, very phenomenologically close to reality. That'll help because otherwise it's like this, right? It's based on the premise that you can catch the disease. Not the coronavirus, the mental pathology of your leaders in your identification with them, right? So what's happening now is there's something going on, in the above the glass ceiling, a meltdown, right? It's like in those James Bond movies. There's one, I can't remember the name of it, where they play this incredible game and it's called For the World, for the domination of the world. Yeah. And it's all done masonically and they have to play this sort of video game, right? And if you watch that scene, right? It's with Klaus Maria Brandauer. That's all I can remember is the German actor who's opposing Roger Moore. It has everything we're talking about, Because in order for the Roger Moore character to win, he's got to go through a pain threshold of such severity that you might as well be being tortured, because the handles that he's holding to manipulate the game are electrified. Right? And he keeps coming back to sit down, even though the enemy's winning time and time again. And every time he loses a point, there's more electrification going through the controls. So he's literally burning up, right? And he stays there. And he goes through the pain barrier and he defeats the Illuminati enemy. Now, what does that mean? Right? And there's a big checkered floor. I mean, they're laying it on. So, they're even dressed in Masonic colors. What he's telling you is that there's a pain threshold to bust through. And as I said before, you'd never get the enemy that's powerful. If you meet a powerful enemy, it's only because you're even more powerful than they. So there's something about tapping in, right, to that wound. And if that wound hasn't actually killed you, then it becomes your greatest ally in the field of battle. It's the blue flame of anger, And America has been flabby for too long. It's allowed all sorts of false religion, false politics, stuff that's so transparently false. And, there's great men out there who always was telling us that, but, they weren't on the bestseller list. And there's been purgings. We could be purged. This video could be taken down. They're taking down already videos where they say it's false information about the coronavirus. Actually, it's mostly truth. But they're taking it down. Even this now totally breaches, right, what they want in the narrative. So don't you see a big brother at all? You can't see that there's somebody. When did I give the right to Google to say what is truth or isn't truth that I want to hear as a listener? I wanted to hear those videos. Who steps into my life to say, no, we're going to decide for you, and you're not going to call that a tyranny that needs to go? You're going to sit there and say, oh, well, too bad, damn it. Nothing can be done against them. They're too damn powerful. Sorry, that may be your way of thinking. It's not mine. I say put a bomb under their ass. Right? Nobody is going to tell me what goes into my body. They don't tell me what to eat and they don't tell me what to wear. Well, they're not going to tell me what is injected into my bloodstream then, are they? But we'll end with a video, but just to make clear why there's a context with what Dr. Jones is saying there, or Nurse Jones is saying, and that is this. It has now come out after a long period of time, because that's what it would take for people on the ground floor to smell a rat, that the coronavirus is not what's killing people. The hospitals are killing people. That's a setup that's been going on for years. Malpractice and iatrogenic death is one of the leading forms of death in hospitals. So they're not really changing their agenda, even in this instance, right? But that aside, upstairs administration, themselves controlled by even higher forces, has told the people on the ground floor to treat these illnesses, no matter what they may be, as you diagnose it and you prescribe for it by that it's coronavirus. That's killing people. So that's, just if you could just embody that, now you'll know. Don't go anywhere near the hospital, and if you do, don't let them diagnose it on that level, because they're going to kill you. Or at least, people over 65 are more vulnerable, but there's others as well. So this piece of information in this video is vitally important, because now the lights are starting to shine. Said on the first program, hey, I do trust some experts, they'll tell you what's going on. In this case, it's boots on the ground, took a bit of time, but now the nurses and the doctors are saying there's something wrong. We can't report it upstairs, because then they tell us to shut up, or they tell us to go home on sick leave, right? We have no power. But through the internet, through the media, through the internet, they're able to come and share with us these things. But they've tried to turn to their administration to say, I think we're treating it all wrong. Of course, slap down right away. Or you can even be assassinated if you try that. I wouldn't recommend trying that. This is a total top-down thing. But guess what? It leaked out, as it often does. And then we are the ones who need to then extrapolate and expand upon it. And what it means is that the Chinese are responsible for this. They thought that they could get away with it and would work to a DEFCON 1 level, because they've got so many agents in the West, in Italy and everywhere else, in America and Britain, that they had no idea that it actually wouldn't work. That probably wasn't even factored in. So the fact is it hasn't worked. And even now, as of the last few hours, I feel the truth about it has really come out. So then that, we've already expanded then on where that might end up. Because, and just as I was forming these thoughts, the president himself is out there saying, yeah, it's a biological attack. You can't take that back tomorrow, right? So that means we're on the verge of war. But what my message is, so let it be, because it'll be taking war to the right enemy. And I'll rest on that for now. With all of very much aware of all of the alternatives, very much aware of the variables to that. I'm aware of that, but at the same time, this is my sharing. This is my 2 cents. So again, we'll leave it there. Maybe if you can have final comments. My part is done.
Well, it's incredible, Michael, and I'm really glad you came on to share this. I My mind is still going. I think there's so much to dissect from this, and I can see it in the chat. People are having some good discussions. So all I can do is I'm just going to read off a quick quote that I promised from C.S. Lewis that I think is really good to keep in the back of our minds as we move forward, and to kind of maybe give some context for how we got here. And then I'm going to leave and close this stream with this video from this doctor from New York City. And I'll say goodbye now. So thanks to everybody for tuning in, for your comments. Positive, negative, I value it all. And we'll be doing more as things go. This is just another thing to bring to the table as a possibility. And it's something we have to consider deeply. So this great quote from C.S. Lewis, he says this of tyranny. He goes, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive of all. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." This was a quote I was saving for my Cult of the Medics episode, which eventually I'll get to. I'm just sort of collecting data from this coronavirus thing, because the evidence of what I was about to present from the past about these medics and these cults and the hospitalers and all that is actually being played out on the main stage right now. So I'm going to leave it with this video, and I hope you all stay safe and well. And if you do want to learn more about how to play with weapons and objects and do all that kind of stuff, and look in your garage and find some cool objects to work with, as I said in the beginning, I'm actually doing an online course for you all to help you with that, with your kids doing that stuff. So if you want some advice on that, I'm doing those projects. So stay tuned for more of that.